Running a successful business is all about leadership. Welcome to Leadership Live, Talking Small Business, the podcast where you will learn from successful business owners and entrepreneurs about how to thrive and not just survive and make more money in any business environment. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro, and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Tonight's an interesting night because not only is this Tuesday night with Leadership Live, it's also election night. And what we hope to do for you is give you a nice little respite from thinking about and worrying about the election, as well as have an opportunity to learn some valuable things that could be helpful for you and your business moving forward. So tonight is just like other nights here on Leadership Live, where we bring in a guest expert to really talk about valuable themes and topics that can help you as a small business owner move your organization forward. And tonight is no different. Our topic for this evening is Win with People, an entrepreneur's journey. And our special guest is Angela Durham. She's a business advisor, strategist, leadership coach with a tremendous experience, many years working with people, developing relationships, both major corporations, other organizations. She's a small business owner, so she understands it from that perspective as well, but really about developing leadership. And that's what Leadership Live is all about, because to be a successful business owner, you need to be a successful leader. We're going to be talking about that this evening with Angela. Hey, Angela, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Andrew. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me this evening. Definitely
Pleasure.
looking forward to our discussion and sharing some valuable things. But before we get started, just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself real quick. Tell us where you're from, a little bit about you and your experience and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to all of your listeners today. Yes, so I am working with you here in the North Jersey area, right, tonight. And but my journey started in central Pennsylvania, growing up outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And the reason why I say that is because tonight being election night, it's really clear how much diversity we have in the country, not just the political diversity, but just regional diversity. And I know that what I have brought to the Northeast market are probably some Pennsylvania Dutch values amongst many other things. And I share that because as you and I were talking before the program tonight, we were just talking about how do you take advantage of the things that are unique to you and make them part of your secret sauce and part of your success. And so I like to acknowledge those different parts because it also helps me when I'm coaching my clients as well, to help them understand what makes them special, unique, and then how to leverage that in the marketplace. So I started out in the business world as a financial banker, working with large multinational corporations, doing credit financings. I actually found myself more attracted to the people behind the deal than the deal itself. And that was a big wake-up moment. And I moved into executive development on Wall Street, and then eventually into diversity, and then eventually into my own executive consulting and management development practice here through Redwood Consulting. So the secret to my own success is a lot of dynamic partnering, helping people get to where they want to be faster and more successfully than they could have on their own. And then being a strategic thought partner, all things that I love to do, but I found a way to monetize it through my business. And so that's what brings me here tonight.
Okay, great. And, we've had a little bit of a similar journey in different ways. Actually, I'm from Pennsylvania as well. Big night for Pennsylvania, but the other side in Pittsburgh, home of the Steelers, of course. And, really spent some time in corporate. One other thing that you do is you teach at Rutgers and Columbia, and
Right.
really work with students on developing their skills. Tell us a little bit about some of the classes that you teach and what you focus on with them.
Well, I have to say, my most favorite class is organizational behavior because there I get to make really explicit the link between leadership behavior, personal style, personal awareness, a leader's actions, and their effect on the top line, bottom line of a company. And so I get to bring that all together in the class. And from that point of view, most of the other programs that I teach are kind of hang off of that silhouette, if you will, because I'm a big believer in authentic leadership and being very clear about your strengths, understanding what your blind spots are, and making sure that you've got the processes and the habits in place to guardrail your behavior so you can be the best leader possible. So,
Okay, and it's interesting. We were talking last week, and I remember back when I was in business school, like the class everybody hated was management and organizational behavior. They're like, oh, this doesn't even make any sense. Let me learn some finance. Let me learn some marketing. These are real business things. But the more time I've spent in business, the biggest challenges for business owners and entrepreneurs, as well as in corporate business, is organizational behavior and managing it effectively. So, it takes a little while for you to realize that, but it's important skill, capabilities, and understanding. And there's a lot of things that go into it that aren't, can be very subtle. And a lot of people, really don't have their skills developed in those areas because they don't know they need to, or they don't understand what it means. Um, can you just talk about what management organizational behavior is? Because a lot of people may not have gone to business school or taken a class like that. What is it really all about?
at its core, Andrew, it is the way we treat people at its core. And when you think of it in a business lens, it's how we welcome people into our companies, into our businesses. It's how we acknowledge when they've done a great job. It's how we give them feedback when we need them to modify their behavior. It's how we ask them to take on additional responsibilities, right? Um, and I don't know why, but it just popped in my head. But I was thinking about my teenager and giving her extra money for doing extra chores because I needed her to like redirect her behaviors. But it's really the same thing, right?
Right.
Um, and then too, of course, it's how we transition people into their next opportunity, whether it's within our company or maybe they've outgrown what we've done, what we're doing, and maybe we need to help them transition into another opportunity outside of where we're working. So I think of it as an end-to-end employee life cycle, more in management terms, but ultimately it is how we treat people day to day and in the big moments as well.
Okay. And, that relates back to, when I'm working with business owners, there's really three books that I recommend they read. And one of the three is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that's really what it's all about, wouldn't you
Yes.
say?
Oh, very much so. And now what's really exciting about it is that there is significant research out there that shows us how the brain works and how the brain responds to positive feelings, positive emotions, and how it's actually able to be more creative in thinking and coming up with solutions to, those day-to-day intractable problems when it's given the room to be creative. So, contrary to that is the manager who may have had a bad day and, in order to whip the team into shape, uses really aggressive language, tense behavior. Well, that really only accomplishes this chain effect in the organization where somebody leaves the meeting and then goes, kicks the trash can, and then kicks the other person, and it goes and ripples throughout the company. So we know now, we've got the data, we've got the scientific research that shows the impact and importance of, taking the leadership pause, if you will.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And even one of my clients recently, I talked to them and counseled them because you know he runs an organization, but when you run the organization, what you say takes on a different meaning and importance depending who you're talking to. So he had reached out to someone to ask if something was done, and for him it was like, is it done? But they're like, oh man, we need to get this done. And but that's not the impact he meant to have. And so as a leader, especially when you're talking to people at much lower levels in the organization, what you say has way bigger impact and can trigger things that you didn't necessarily want to trigger or you don't even know about. So, that's an important thing as a leader that you have to learn, so that your organization can function more effectively.
Agreed. Which makes me think of another point too, Andrew. Um, when you and I were coming through corporations, it was very much top down command and control. But with Gen Y, X, Z, and all those that are coming after, because of technology, people are more used to operating on an equal playing field. And so our social skills as leaders really are more about peer-to-peer conversations. And so for that reason, I call it having a certain sense of conversational intelligence, being able to walk into a meeting side by side with people at all levels in your company, being able to have a comfortable conversation, because if they feel that you understand them, they will feel that there's a little bit more trust in the environment, and they'll be more likely to raise their hand and say, I saw something that I don't think it works well in the process, or they'll more readily own a mistake. And those things multiplied over 5, 6, 10 people can really make a big difference to the top line, bottom line, right? So this sort of emotional intelligence, relational intelligence is really important, even more so now with the people that we tend to find ourselves managing.
Yes. And as a leader, one of the things that I learned that was huge and is everybody's not you. So you can't expect them to be you and do what you would do. And having kids helps with that, because you cannot control your kids and you can't make them you. It's interesting with my daughter because, I asked her to help me with stuff or whatever. And, she'll give me like the teacher thing, okay, and she comes down and she's like, whatever. But, I'll give her something to do and she'll disappear and do it and do a great job. But, I'm used to like having people around collaborating, them say, okay, let's go do it now. And she just doesn't work that way. And so you got to figure out, how can you influence them to be their best? And you can't just, you have to change along with the times and who you're dealing with. And, with the new generation more than ever before.
Oh, but I agree. And still, the beauty about working and having so many different generations in the same physical location is that they're probably going to be more familiar with things like crowdsourcing, technology, the things that maybe, you and I aren't digital natives with, right? And in return, with our business experience, they have the opportunity to learn about some very basic people skills. And then together, I'm not, I think you use Myers-Briggs in your business, but, you know, the two can still be complementary just in terms of what sort of data they will pick up in the business landscape, right? So for example, um, one of my business colleagues is much more focused on process and procedure. And
Mhm.
she is just an incredible guardrail for me, who tends to be a little bit more on the visionary side, and says, okay, well, how do we move 50 yards down the field? I know that's the direction I want, but I really need to have a little help figuring out the process to get there sometimes. And so she's like a great thought partner in terms of executing on strategies that I've developed. So when we understand that we have our own unique strengths, then we're much more open and curious about other people's strengths to see how we can partner and collaborate, which is really what this generation's all about.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. So definitely, we talked about a lot of things, and you spoke at my Power Breakfast several years ago, and really did a
Can't believe.
great job around. Yeah, no, time flies. But your topic was, you really talked about um, the three steps that as a business owner, um, every business transitions through or needs to transition through. And the first step is that of a maker,
Yeah.
and the second step is that of a master, and the third step is that of a market leader. Can you talk a little bit about what those are and what they mean?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to give you a gold star because you remembered all the labels very well. Thank you. You go forth, go forth, spread the word. Um, so, in all fairness, giving due credit to Mary Lippitt, she was the one of the research scientists who came up with organizational priorities, and so that model uh, abbreviates what she developed many years ago, which talks about how organizational priorities change, and with it, the skills that we bring to meet the priorities of the business. So, in at the maker level, that's all about being entrepreneurial and trying to figure out what your business model is about, right? So you might have a startup mentality, the people around you, it's everything rushed to market. It's to make it a viable business strategy. And so the behaviors that you see are focused on execute, 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 right? Make it, make it, make it. And so with that, um, most people are really focused on defining the business model, developing revenue, and then seeing if they can make a go of it, right? So people in that case typically have a good sense of what their secret sauce is, what they bring to the table. They're very clear about the partner, the one or two other people that they are working with, because together they know that they need to build this business. But what becomes really interesting is at that point where you said, aha, I have a client. Oh my goodness, I have client number two. Whoa, three, it's raining clients, right? And it's all really exciting. But that's when you start to run into this issue of how can I repeat my success? And how do I make sure this just isn't a fluke? And that's where you need to have some consistent revenue streams if you want to bring in outside investors, whether it's capital or talent investors, right? And in order to do that, the personalities involved, if they're not already really strong on process, they really need to tighten up the process. And not everyone who's a visionary has the capability to do both vision and process, or client and process. So that's where you run into quality issues at this kind of master phase, right? So the goal of the master phase is to come up with consistent, repeatable client processes and a revenue model, right? That can help you grow to yet the next level, where I call the person moving into that space the market leader. Now, the opportunity for interpersonal skills, if you will, at that master level, is really to engage the people around you to develop great processes and follow them, right? Having process without following it is not a business make. And so at that point, the entrepreneur is less likely to be involved in every phase of the process. And so now we have employee will and motivation. And so this is kind of the first time that some entrepreneurs can run into a little bit of trouble because now they have to, as you said, recognize, whoa, wait a minute, Andrew is not me. He might have different skills and he might even approach the process slightly different than I do. Oh, am I comfortable with that? Where are we going? And conversational skills and that sort of team building is really important at that point, right? And then when you get to the leadership level, when you become a market leader, you've now scaled to beyond 5 or 6, 7, 8 people. And this notion of management culture that you talked about earlier becomes even more important because at that point, the original entrepreneur is clearly not going to be in every transaction, in every room, and not able to represent the company that they've so started in the way that they would like. And so now you have to create culture leaders. You have to create buy-in of people. And this is where trust becomes even more important and mutual accountability becomes really important.
Okay. No, I think definitely that's a great progression, important progression. It actually matches up with the Masterpreneur playbook that I put together, where it's really you're going from, working to create a business, working in your business. So, first you have to create product or service that you can set up as your business. Then you work in your business to really create a market and make sure it's viable.
Right,
From
right.
there, you got to work on your business. And that's really where you have to institute processes, procedures, and systems so that you can build capacity. And
Right.
that's a really difficult step for most business owners because you have to take on a whole new role. You go from being an employer or supervisor to being a manager. And many employees, maybe you have supervisors and you are the manager, but that doesn't mean you're a good manager. And if you're not a good manager, then that means your organization is not managed well. And that keeps you from moving forward because at the end of the day, your business can't move any further than you're prepared to take it. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here is you have to go from doing things to being able to impact things getting done. And it's very difficult for people to do that. Less than 5% of businesses actually successfully move and work on their business.
Yeah, it's a really tricky skill to learn. I think one of the most important things at that stage is learning how to delegate. But delegate doesn't mean just assign it to somebody and walk away. It's, this gradual transition of ownership from me to us to eventually you. And there's this like mini apprenticeship that happens along the way while you are laying out the goals, laying out the task, looking for feedback on how that little process can be improved to eventually seeking guidance from the person you've delegated to because they now have become the master of that particular process. So that's a really tricky space, but that's where there's great reward too.
Right. And a lot of people need coaching through that because
Mhm.
if you've never seen it done or you've never done it,
Yeah,
you don't really know what it's supposed to look like or how to
true.
do it. Fortunately, I've been in, every role from employee, supervisor, manager, executive, you know, organizational leader,
Yeah.
and, in large businesses and small. So, having seen that and understanding that, that's helped me understand how to put the playbook together Um, but when you're making that transition, um, I found, and you probably have too, that the personality of someone who starts a business and gets it up and running, it's very difficult for them to be patient enough and to be detail oriented enough to really do the processes and procedures, because a lot of times they're bouncing off the walls.
Very much so. I work with a coach assessment instrument where we have a database of over 100,000 executives around the world. And when we assessed the database, what we found out is that those leaders that were really good on delivering on the task were actually not the same people who are really good in the relationship side. So there's this sort of healthy tension. And I always say to leaders, rather than try to be what you're not, bring the other resource and the talent in, right? Delegate that out.
Hmm. So definitely important to do that, but sometimes you can't as a small business owner. You don't have the money, you don't have the right people on your team, so you have to learn how to do things. How do you encourage people to figure out how to develop themselves into being able to do those types of roles?
So there's two things that I do, both personally and then in working with other clients. First of all, you have to recognize that the need exists. So getting feedback from clients, from colleagues, from people who might sit on your advisory board is often a good start, because they can see things so easily, so that you're just totally blindsided by it because it's just not in your cognitive wheelhouse, right? And to be fair, by the time you're in your 20s, these habits and these blind spots tend to repeat themselves. They're no news, and it's not new news. And if you honestly think back to even childhood, much of it already existed way back then, right? So get some feedback. That's the first thing. And then the second is, um, since you still have to deliver on all aspects of the business, I find it easy for clients to do what I call secondhand behavior by just scheduling it in the calendar, right? Doing a couple hours of maybe the administration of the business on a day where you're not pressured to do other things, and make it a routine, make it a habit, so that you're not having to think anew and climb the mental hurdles to actually do the work that is difficult for you. So sometimes I have some clients who will routinely set aside 2 o'clock after lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays to do some particular task that they just don't like, but they've already made great headway in the other things that they do enjoy, and it's after lunch. And so they're ready to, lean in to the business, if you will, right? Others will set aside a Saturday morning to focus on, design, if you will, whatever that behavior is that's not in their kind of sweet spot.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. Um, Makes a lot of sense. We're getting great comments on Facebook and appreciate everybody joining in. Thanks, Timothy, for joining us again. We got John, Karen out of Pittsburgh.
Awesome.
We've got, you know, Wendy. Thanks for joining in. Maddie, Delarue, Shelton. We went to Navy Supply Corps school together many, many years ago. I won't say how many, but actually a friend of ours from there, Stan Dobbs, was a guest on Leadership Live a few weeks ago. And, it was a great session. We talked about geese poop, roadkill, and how he saved the Navy $1.8 billion in 18 months. So that was a pretty interesting session in itself. So if
Nice.
you're interested, it's still up on Facebook under our things. So thanks for joining us. Always appreciate it. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try and answer those as well. So,
This is great. This is great. I hello to Pittsburgh.
yeah, yeah. So, definitely the home team. So is always good. And, it's great. Facebook Live's great because you connect with people that, you might not have seen or talked to in a good period of time, and, enjoyed having this. So now, one thing that you talked about was, a lot of times people, you can see things in people and patterns over time, and they might not even notice it.
Yeah.
And one thing that another book that I always have people read is Michael Gerber's The E-Myth. And one thing he said is, your company is a reflection of you. So if you're sloppy and disorganized, your company's going to be sloppy and disorganized. And unless you realize that and, work to change that, which can be difficult. How do you work with people, and what strategies have you seen to help people recognize some of their challenges and how to overcome them within their organization?
So often when somebody reaches out, it's because something that they're trying to get done isn't working.
Okay.
And often what's not working will show up in they're not doing something right, right? It's the persons they're working with aren't listening. The persons they're working with don't get it. And so I'm called in to be something of a coach or a thought partner on how to get those other people to do something differently. So that's usually the kind of the surface dilemma that presents itself. And usually I like to use personality assessments, executive assessments to give the business owner real data about how they show up to the people around them. How do the people that work with them experience them as a leader, as a mentor, as an advocate, as a manager? What's working and what isn't? And sometimes that becomes a moment of truth for a manager. The other assessment that I like to do is really around personality to help them get a psychological kind of roadmap on their strengths and their preferences and where it can be where they can be great assets in communicating on teams, on handling conflict. Everyone has to manage change, particularly now in this environment. And so these habits and patterns become very predictable once you understand the underlying psychological roadmap. And once somebody becomes familiar with their personal roadmap, now they have a lot of power. Now they're not always in a react mode. They can actually begin to think about how they want to respond to a situation. So giving those two pieces of data become incredibly important in creating self-awareness.
Okay.
Once we've had that opportunity to talk through self-awareness and just who they are underneath it all, right? Then we can begin to talk about what are the challenges that they see, what are they trying to accomplish, and then how to flex their style, still be authentic, but flex to their style to meet the communication needs of the people around them. And that usually takes us about 75% of the way there.
Okay. No, that's great. I mean, definitely knowing is half the battle,
Yeah.
and helping people understand that in the right way is key. And one of the tools I use, and I know you use, is Myers-Briggs personality assessment.
Yeah.
So, but if you're in a corporation, you probably know what that is. But if you're in a small business, it's probably unlikely that you really even know what that is. So can you say what that is and how it can be helpful to people?
Yeah, sure. There was a mother and daughter team post World War II, Myers and Briggs, who developed this sort of forced sort instrument, meaning you would pick between option A, option B. Um, and it was developed to help servicemen returning from World War II find gainful employment in the workforce. Since the 1940s and the end of World War II, it's grown and been adapted to for career counseling, for family counseling. Um, I have noticed that even in the middle school and in the high schools and the public schools here in New Jersey, they have it online, and students are able to use it for career exploration as well. And so, what that does is it helps make um, clear individual needs and wants for people. And you might say, well, okay, so why is that important? Well, it creates a common language between, say, you and myself, the people I work with. And instead of seeing someone as being passive aggressive or resistant, you often find out that you just have two different language styles, two different communication preferences. So, for an example, the most obvious one that people see is this dichotomy called introversion and extroversion. Now, in mainstream, it means something quite different than what they use it for in Myers Briggs. In Myers Briggs, an introversion really talks about where do I get my energy from? An introvert will get their energy from, being more alone and free to think with their own thoughts. I, as an extrovert, I love and get a lot of energy from working with other people. In fact, Andrew, you've been in my classroom now that I think about it. And that's where I come alive, right? And whereas an introvert after an evening teaching at, the business school might come home and like want a glass of wine to just relax. I'm wired. My brain is on fire and I'm ready to think about the next class and the next innovation and so forth. So understanding that and then having respect for that other difference now allows us to partner a lot better so that my extroversion doesn't, wear you down and your introversion doesn't wear me down, and we can support each other more effectively.
Yeah. Okay. And for all you Matrix fans out there, I don't know if you're a Matrix fan, but one of the key things is when Neo meets the Oracle for the first time, and she introduces him to the sign over his head, and it says "Temet Nosi" or something like that, and it means "know thyself." And as a business owner, the more you know about yourself, the more effectively you can be a leader. And the less you know, the more damaging it's going to be to your organization. And the larger your organization grows, the greater the impact, either in a positive or negative way. So Myers-Briggs is one way to learn about that, but there's other assessments also that you do, right? What are some of the other things?
They'll have the color cue, which was done by Shoya Zishi, a former leader in the Myers-Briggs community who simplifies the Jungian work there. Bates assessments also uses colors to help people. So you have 4 colors instead of the 16 types in Myers-Briggs. The difference between Myers-Briggs and the other 2 assessments is that Myers-Briggs has about 2 million people taking the assessment each year. And so the support tools and the materials being translated into a bevy of languages is just far superior. But for efficiency's sake, sometimes you'll go into Color Cue or the Bates, or there's some online programs like Truity that I use in the classroom because it simplifies it and it's less expensive for the client, particularly in the nonprofit space. I do like for, for some organizations, I do like using the 360 assessments because then they get to calibrate not only within their they get to calibrate against other senior leaders and other clients running those types of businesses. Um, and if you have an international client who wants to see how they compare to, say, European leaders or Japanese leaders, those are important metrics to have as well. And so I bring that in on occasion.
Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So yeah, so all those things are important. In my book, one of my chapters is called "Is It Me or Are My Employees Crazy?" Because most business owners, their employees could drive them crazy for one reason or another. And, like you said before, a lot of times you're like, oh, the employees aren't listening. They don't understand me. This is what I need done. Why don't they do it? But, at the end of the day, it's your business. You make all the rules. And if it's not working the way you want it, you need to look in the mirror because it's because of you. And that could be a hard pill to swallow. But once you understand that, then you realize that you need to learn and develop yourself and understand how to lead and influence people more effectively. And if you don't come to that realization, you're never going to be able to take your business further than a certain point. And so, when you look at it, yes, your employees are responsible for doing things, but as a leader, it's your job to empower them and give them what they need to be successful. And, one of the things they say is, you work with people effectively and you work with tasks efficiently. So what's the difference between that and what does that mean?
Well, there was at the grocery store today, a woman had a T-shirt. And you'll recognize the saying because it's pretty similar. Um, if you want to get someplace fast, work alone. If you want to go far, work with others, work together, right?
Yeah.
And I know most entrepreneurs I know are in it for the long game, right? And that therein is the challenge, right? Task versus relationship, and how do you do them both equally well, and how do you make sure um, that you're building a culture? And this, by the time you're like at that master phase and leadership phase, market leader, everyone is, look, all eyes are on you. You cannot walk into a room and not be noticed at that point. And so what you say, what you do, everything, from how you walk in, how you treat the lowest person on the proverbial totem pole, has everyone's attention. And it really sets the tone for how people treat each other. Um, when things go right, how do you celebrate? Do you, in fact, celebrate? When things are middling, how do you motivate other people? How do you keep their eyes on the prize? Because whatever it is you're doing, you can be sure that the people below you are learning, they're watching you, and they're encoding it into their brain. This is how business gets done here. So if I want to stay, this is what I'm going to do too. So, when you see something you don't like in your organization, there's really only one person that you can hold accountable for, and that's yourself.
Yeah. And you mentioned the C word, culture.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, especially small business owners, that's a new term for them. But it's one of your most important responsibilities as a business owner is to create the culture within your organization, which drives it. And like you said, culture is really the way we do things around here. And if you're not setting the culture, then who is? And if you're sending mixed messages, then it's confusing people. and causing, distress and, and making it more difficult for people to be successful and deliver upon your goals.
Yeah.
So, when you're thinking about culture, first say a little bit about what it is, and, as a business owner, what's your responsibility as far as culture, and how do you impact culture?
When I think about culture, I go back to what we talked about before. At its core, how we treat each other, right? So at that point where you have several people working together, and when I'm working with a team, we'll talk about what it is they're doing. And then invariably, there will be a point where I say, so tell me about the processes you're using. How is it working for you? And sometimes I get a blank because they're like, what do you mean? We got the marketing materials out, we delivered the program, we made the client happy. I said, yes, that's great. And could you have made the client happier? Could you have made each other happier? And that's when you start to unpack this notion of culture about the way you work. And so I like helping clients set some time aside to assess, are you living into your values as a company? Are those values the same as your personal values? Um, what does performance look like? Are you creating a star system, like you win at any cost? Or are you living with integrity? Because those sorts of values, um, there are advertising agencies who spend hours, countless hours, helping big corporations put company values into a statement, right? Drive with good neighbor. Who's the drive with good neighbor insurance company, right? um, State Farm, I think, your good neighbor. And so that becomes another part of goodwill accounting and part of your secret sauce. And it's really important that teams, when they come together, they spend a little bit of time to say to each other, how are we demonstrating our values? What are our values? Do we know how to articulate them to the next person we hire? Actually, are we hiring for our values? Because there's a point in time where just hiring for technical skill won't allow you to hire the next great brain into the organization.
Right, right. And, another thing about culture is, a test for your culture is, if your culture attracts the right people and repels the wrong people, that's when you have a strong culture, and usually a good culture. You know, there's organizations that I could go to and work for and feel perfectly at home and be successful. But I could go to a similar organization that has a totally different culture where I wouldn't be able to be successful. And it really, like you said, identifies with your values, identifies, but the stronger your culture, the more effective it is for your business. Like back in the day, IBM was known for having a really strong culture. And you would never, ever see an IBM person, whatever level, wearing anything but a white shirt, a tie, and a suit. And usually it's a dark suit. You're like, oh, they're just like, sometimes you could be like, oh yeah, that's a government worker. There's a culture and a type of person, and you can see it embodied in a lot of different areas. But a lot of small business cultures are sort of left to the wind to whatever happens, rather than it being managed. And
They don't realize it can be a great asset, right?
right, right. So so that's key. And we're coming up close to 9. Like we talked about an hour, like it would be long, but it's actually short. But
If, yeah, we could go a lot deeper on some of these things, Andrew.
right, Right. Which is great. That's why I love talking small business and having something like this, talking with great people. And, we're talking about winning with people, an entrepreneur's journey, and, Leadership Live. And, not only are we talking with Angela here, and she's doing a lot of great things, she's also developing a course on this topic for the Small Business Pro University, which we're excited to have just launched as a great resource for entrepreneurs and small business owners. I'm going to take a second and just play a quick video to let you know a little bit more about it, because this could be something of value to you and your business. Do you own your business, or does it own you? Are you having cash flow issues, or do you need financing? Is your business growing, and are you making enough money? As a business owner, there are so many things you need to know to become more successful. You must continually increase your knowledge, even though it is difficult to find a comprehensive, quality source of information that is readily available. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, the Business Growth Pro and CFO. I empower business owners to maximize the value of their companies by growing revenue, increasing profit, and obtaining financing. I've worked with over 500 business owners one-on-one and have taught thousands of people about business. I'm the author of Running Your Small Business Like a Pro. The more you know, the faster you grow. I created the Small Business Pro University for you and collaborated with other experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who are experts in their respective fields. Whether your challenges are in marketing, finance, operations, or strategy, we've got you covered. Small Business Pro University has self-paced, dynamic, multimedia learning experiences created by more than 20 instructors who are business owners just like you. Some of the courses are even in Spanish, and new ones are being added all the time. Each course is clear, concise, and focused because we respect your busy schedule. Small Business Pro University will empower you to become a masterpreneur by learning the secrets to creating a successful enterprise, to go from working in your business to working on your business.
He's provided me with valuable feedback.
I gotta say, I'm glad I trusted you with your plan, because
words that you've said to me, I say them to myself all the time.
And, Andrew breaks it down in a very understandable way.
Become a Masterpreneur Club member. Take advantage of our strategic coaching program, or just simply choose the courses that you need. Please feel free to sample our offerings at www.sbprou.com. Test drive one of our free courses to experience the benefits. We will empower you to thrive and not just survive, and make more money in any business environment. Look forward to having Angela on the university. I appreciate you for joining us this evening and sharing some of your expertise as well. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Anything you want to share with the audience, or that you wanted to cover before we sign off?
No, Andrew, I'm really glad to be here. I thank everyone. To find out more about what we do at Redwood Consulting, we're at www.redwoodconsultingpartners.com. So thanks for having me.
Okay, great. Thanks, Angela. Again, thank you all for tuning in as well. I had a great evening, a great chat. Looking forward to next week. We've got Julbert Abraham, and we're going to be talking about LinkedIn Navigator. LinkedIn is on fire now, and given what's going on in the virtual world, it's a must for business owners, and it's important to be able to use it effectively. And Gilbert's working with people across the globe and helping them to develop their skills and being able to sell and market more effectively through LinkedIn, which is a super powerful tool. So look forward to catching you next week for Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Thank you and have a great week.